We'll get started as soon as Commissioner Dellinger gets up here.
But I know Jason also.
We're going to call this joint meeting of the Henry County Council. Actually, it's a work session on whatever date it is, May 13th. We are going to start with a pledge. Thank you. Would you like to say a prayer? Go ahead. You want to have a prayer? Oh, Susan said we'll have a prayer. We'll not deviate from the normal.
God, thanks for today, and thank you for providing for all of us this past week. God, please be with us today as we talk through the county's scarce resources and give us wisdom as we start to talk through options for next budget session. Amen.
Thank you. Jason, I think you gave out a draft copy of the comp plan to everybody, all the commissioners, council. I have not heard from Kyle. I thought he was coming. Betsy, medical reason, she's not going to be here. So I'm going to turn it over, if there's no objections, to Jason and go through the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thanks, members of the council and the commissioners. This is a drafted report. I think this is how we've done it in the past, where we've just kind of presented a draft, kind of first illustration of the report, just to kind of get some feedback, just confirm some assumptions, and then based upon our discussion here, we'll finalize this and prepare. I want to say a final, but it's never really final because it's always constantly changing, but a more current, a more updated report. So this doesn't have all the some of the general comments and things at the beginning that it usually has. I just kind of went right into the numbers so we can start talking about the assumptions. So I'll kind of go through here, but definitely as you have questions or you see something that, no, this isn't the correct assumption, there's something that we need to add or change, feel free to stop me, because that's what I want tonight to be about, is, you know, updating this to be as accurate as possible. So we'll just kind of jump right in on page 1. Talking about some of the assumptions that we used for our projections. The maximum levy growth, again, so this is the amount that we can increase the budgets payable from property taxes each year. So in 2024, you see there number 1, it was able to increase by 4% for this year. For 2025, we're estimating that'll be 3.9%. If you remember, the legislators kind of changed the formula to max it at 4% for the next couple years. So we could potentially get up to 4%, but based upon some history and this year's growth, we think it's going to be about 3.9. In the 2026, 4.8. In 2027, 4.3 is what we're estimating. That's something that it's been discussed that the legislators could say we like that 4% max, and they may flatline that going forward. So that's something that, if you want me to be extra conservative and flat that at 4% going forward, I can. But right now, on our best guesstimate, we think it would be above 4%.
They talked about doing that 4% and extending it 2 years this last legislative session, right, and they did not do that.
Right. Yeah, we told them, let's just stop and let the dust settle before you make any other changes. But like I said, if you want us to be conservative and drop that down to 4%, we can do that. Any thoughts on that, or just keep it as it is?
We have benefited from you being conservative. That's how we've built up a cash balance to allow the kind of raise we did last year. So I don't know if changing that now is going to make a lot of difference.
Well, let's look at the rest of the schedules.
Okay.
It might, but we'll, okay. But number 2 just shows how that property tax levy that you've collected over the last couple of years, how it's been allocated amongst your various funds that fall within the maximum levy. So your general fund, reassessment, Hume Bridge, health, and park. So if you look at 2024, the second line, you can see 84% of your levy was allocated to the general fund. And then you can see how the rest of them kind of sprinkled through. And we just kept that going forward. But as you know, that's when you're working on our budget, as we get closer, that's something that you can move from one fund to the other, depending upon your budget needs. But for right now, we just kept it constant going forward. Page 2 is circuit breaker. So again, this is the amount of property taxes you don't collect because of the property tax caps. This year, your levy was reduced by almost 14%, 13.9%, because of circuit breaker losses, which is a little bit lower than historically, but that's because we saw your large increase in tax base. So that's the positive thing. I did increase it back to 16% in 2025, so that's a pretty big jump. A couple reasons I did that. It was one, I think AVs are going to level out a little bit going forward. I also know, and as I'm sure you would do as well, Newcastle did levy or did issue a bond issue earlier this year payable from property taxes. That's going to have an impact on everyone in the county as far as the increase in circuit breaker losses a little bit. So knowing that, I increased yours a little bit as well. So then assuming a 16% reduction in 2025 and then just a gradual increase in 26 and 27. Again, I'm hoping that's conservative, but
Last year, for 25, you'd estimated 19.3%, so 16 doesn't sound that bad.
no. And that's because you dropped so much for 2024 because of the large increase in your tax base, which again, positive. Levy excess, auto excise, I kept those the same, nothing new there. Your other revenues just either did what you were certified for this year or did the average. At the bottom of page 2, your disbursements, we just assumed a 3% increase in all your operating costs as usual. And then for capital outlays, we either assumed a 0% increase, we just kept your budget, or if you'll see here in a couple of funds, what you budgeted for your capital outlay for 24, it wasn't sustainable based upon your revenue, so I knocked it down to match the revenue that you were coming in. So we'll show that here in a minute. Page 3, again, I just like to show this because it shows how difficult it is for you to do your job with your budget. This is the amount of circuit breaker losses that you have seen over the years. So you can see in 2017, you lost 1.1 million, and then you can see 2022, it was 2.1 million. And then you can see it decreased a little bit the last couple years, again, because you saw the increase in your assessed value. But then you can see I'm projecting that to go up, again, starting next year. One, because I think your budget's going to increase faster than your tax base, and then because of also new bond issues.
Those are still lower amounts than you projected a year ago.
Yeah.
Quite a bit, actually.
Page 4, I'll kind of skip over page 4, but if anyone wants to cheat ahead, this is kind of a summary of all the funds, the ending balances. And we're going to go through each one of these individually.
But general has gone up.
Yeah, kind of looking at this as a snapshot on page 4, your general fund is going up, but the concern is if you look at your statewide 911, it's still going down.
Even with the PSAP, that doesn't.
Well, that's one thing I want to discuss, because I think I saw where we have a budget for the PSAP, but I didn't see anything being reduced out of the 911. So I wanted to see if we needed to adjust that.
Because we're getting 1.1 million coming in on PSAP.
Right. Yeah.
That
Yeah, I
would
guess
make
that's really
a
all I
huge
wanted to
difference,
there.
wouldn't it?
What's
I
that?
mean, getting 1.1 million in PSAP would make a big difference on that line, would it not?
Yeah, and we'll show that. We have that in here. That's where I think we may have moved some budget from 911 to PSAP, but we haven't taken anything from the 911 budget.
Yeah, major. Yeah, we need to discuss that.
I'm sorry, I should be talking into my mic. We moved almost everything into the PSAP budget. Is there anything left in the other E911 budget? There's just a few things because there's still a small amount of dollars that come into that fund. So, yeah, almost the entire budget was moved into
Yeah,
PSAP.
I think that'll be modified dramatically.
Yeah, so we'll get to that, because that was one of my questions. So on page 5, looking at the county general fund, again, historical, again, we've seen an increase. If you look at the ending fund balance, line 35, you can see in 2021, we ended at 2.8 million. 2022 ended at 3.1, and 2023 ended at 6.1. Based upon the assumptions that we've talked about and based upon the 2024 budget, we're looking at, if you look at line 32, at bringing about $850,000 more than what we're spending based upon the 2024 budget, and not including any additional appropriations. So that's one thing that I wanted to make sure that the 2024 budget included all raises that have been approved, and or see if we need to include any additional appropriations. I don't think you've had any so far out of the general fund, but I know historically we have.
We've had a lot of additional appropriations because of things that happened at the state level.
Yeah. Jail lit, but not general. Did we do any additionals to fund?
Yeah, the jail, that was
general
the main
fund?
one we had to adjust.
Just the, the interlocal one.
So did you have additional appropriation out of the general fund though?
No.
Okay.
So that is the 80,000. Is that one time or is that multiple years?
That was 100,000.
And we haven't talked about any for the general fund.
No, it was
but
80. I'm sorry.
Potentially more for jail lit, but we haven't talked about any for the general. No, we have
Sorry,
not.
we haven't done anything for the insurance, increase in insurance or anything like that yet?
We haven't.
We have not. Have we seen that invoice yet? Yeah, I was going to say it was coming. Okay.
Yeah,
So would that be an additional?
Yes.
probably from the general, because it's not, we don't have it anywhere else.
And the 80,000 or 100,000?
It was 80. My mistake. I'm sorry.
Do you have any idea what that insurance was? Would that be a one-time, or would that be continuous?
It's going to be recurring.
So as you can see, as Debbie's looking at that, if you look at line 32, this is what concerns me a little bit. Line 32, that's the increase amount of revenue coming in above expenses. In 24, it's 850,000. In 2025, it's 600,000. 26, it's 500. 27, it's 400. So it's growing, but every year it's growing a little
Trending
bit
the
less.
wrong way, yeah.
Yeah.
So once we get this insurance number and any additionals, that can make this outlook a little different.
We knew with the raise that we had, we're just going to do a tick back. We've been upticking more and more with balance. We knew that that was going to dig into this, I'm not going to say surplus, but into our balance more.
Mm-hmm.
I was anxious to see from this report how much more.
Yeah.
Because without doing that kind of raise, we would be well into the 30% balance in the general fund. With that, I figure it's going to be going backwards more like 25%.
I mean, if you look here, it's projected to be 43%.
Yeah, right now, without any additions, I mean, you're very, you're going in the right direction, even though you're increasing a little bit each year.
One thing
But-
we've talked about is what we want to keep that operating balance at. I mean, there's an ideal, and then there's what's best for our county, given that we're trying to do a lot with the money we have. So are we trying to get up to 50%, or are we okay with a lower number?
Or is it that 6 months?
The 6 months is the 50%. So I know that's again, 15% is the minimum. We're past that now. You know, anywhere from 25, 30%, I would say not go below that. If you really wanted to move money into the rainy day fund, I wouldn't do anything that would drop you below 30%. But I do like that 50%, that 6 months, especially with you're not quite at 50% now and the trend that you're going. I mean, and to be honest with you, whether it's in your rainy day fund or your general fund, it's still there.
We have a question from Angela.
The parks budget was kind of messed up from the beginning just because the way it was submitted. So they are going to have to come for an additional. Also, they just haven't done it yet because they're trying to decide exactly what they want to ask for. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We had a chunk of dollars that we put into reclassification so that it was still in the general fund. So we moved those dollars into the individual departments for their raises. Yours did not have that luxury.
Mm-hmm.
If
It was just the fund that they moved theirs into as a holding fund. You can create, I don't know if you need to create another line item, but it doesn't necessarily have to be named reclassification.
And we'll talk about the health fund with that additional appropriation too, which will impact your general fund because, I guess, kind of skipping ahead. Right now we're showing that because of the additional appropriation, there's not enough money to cover that. So your general fund's really going to have to subsidize that. So probably going forward, we're going to have to reduce the levy from your general fund and put more to your health fund, which I'll show that here in a minute.
Okay.
The next fund, page 6, is reassessment. That's, I think typically Jody doesn't spend all of her budget, but you know, right now, even with the budget that she has, you have enough money, you know, coming in to cover her budget and still have a healthy balance in that fund. So not worry about the reassessment. The park non-reverting. This fund looks good. The one thing that I did notice that kind of surprised me, if you look at line 14, I just want to make sure this was correct. Historically, well, I guess last year, the personal services, you spent $270,000. This year's budget was only $227,000. So I wanted to make sure that that was.
Susan might have some comment.
And on page 7, the park, one thing I just wanted to make sure that we didn't have any surprises. If you look at line 14, in 2023, the personal services actual expense was about $270,000. In 2024, the budget's $227,000.
Yeah, they're going to come back, and they had just submitted that as to be determined, which was translated to 0. And so they're going to come back and ask for an additional, and it's going to be roughly the same as personal services in 23.
Okay.
Does that include
So
like
that-
insurance?
I'm sorry, Kenan.
What, does that include insurance? What's personal?
It's their people and part-time help and their labor.
Okay.
So an extra $40,000. So
I would
they can
say,
handle,
yeah.
the park fund can handle that.
But yeah, so this showing the increase in operating balance, it won't probably. They do once, once they correct that additional personal services, they will have some extra money, but my guess is they'll use it for some type of equipment. I don't think that will really increase, but
What about the other services and charges, line 16? It's quite a bit less than what they've
Right.
spent historically, too.
yeah. I don't remember. Oh, was that, I mean, I know we took out their request for 4-H upkeep and fireworks, and I'm not sure what they had moved out of the way to put there, fuel. I don't know exactly how that'll pan out. Yeah.
We just knew they were going to come back for.
They're going to come
quite a
back and
bit of-
ask for most of, I mean, they'll come back and ask for their money. They'll,
So maybe kind of based off the 2023?
yeah,
budget. Okay.
it will be just dispersed different ways, I think.
Okay.
Maybe additional capital outlays if they get equipment. I'm not
Okay.
sure.
You're their liaison, right? You're their liaison.
Yeah.
Well, then with that, knowing that, then pretty much the park fund right then will be about balanced, about what they're going to spend about everything they bring in. So, okay. Page 8 is the health fund. So this is where I mentioned now with this additional appropriation on line 18, and continuing that forward, you'll be spending about 250, and it's going to grow each year more than what you're bringing in. So even this year in 2024, we're showing that we're not going to have enough money to cover that budget. So that's probably going to have to come out of the general fund.
You know, she has an additional 1160, or she has an additional fund. This is just the 1159. She's here for probably to inform you of some changes with it. Health First.
Okay.
So I can send you, what I've
Okay.
essentially cut, knowing that that was going to happen.
Okay.
So I think, I'm probably going to be close, but I'm watching it.
Okay.
And I think we're going to be okay this year. And if I am a little short, I think I'm going to be able to move some part-time hours into the other fund.
Okay.
The bigger, question comes with the 2025 budget for the Health First Indiana. And how the state has done that is that there's a minimum county match dependent upon how much money we receive. And so on the absolute low end of that, we would receive $1,063,879.50 on the absolute low end. And then the minimum county match would be $238,455.75.
And
we have that in our current budget.
I think we would be fine
Yeah.
in 2025. My hope was to not have to, I'm not asking for any additional, obviously, from the levy, but at least to keep the levy where it's at. Thinking in the future, we're running every 2 years with the state budget, and we don't know what that's going to happen. And if, at this point, with it only, if we did the minimum and we only got that minimum match, that minimum isn't even covering our health insurance for the employees, and that would be moving absolutely everything, every employee, insurance, everything over into the Health First funding with that, and that wouldn't even cover, so.
Does that $1,063,000, does that go into this fund, or does it go in your other fund?
The what?
The $1,063,000?
The 230, the minimum, you mean?
Yeah.
That's the 1159 match. Yeah,
Okay.
that would be the health fund match.
Okay.
And then it goes up, by whatever percentage, depending on how much money we get from the state.
If you want, I can call you later this week, and we can kind of work through this together.
That would be lovely.
Okay.
Okay,
Yep.
perfect, thank you.
Yep. Well, that's good, because that was one thing I was afraid of, that we might have to use some of the general fund to subsidize that. So it
Yeah,
sounds
I
like this
saw
may
there's
be-
a lot of red highlighting on this sheet, and I figured you did not have the information from the Health First, the Senate Bill 4 from last year info.
Page 9 is the public safety local income tax. Oh, one thing I forgot on the general fund, and it also impacts here, is one thing we don't have is the supplemental income tax that you received. I know Debbie says you received the total amount, but we don't know the individual allocation yet, so,
We know that already?
We don't have individual, we
Oh.
just have the lump sum.
Is it
So-
now what was expected? Okay.
so that's something that I'll add hopefully here in the next week or so, once we get that information. But I don't have that in here now, but even without that, it shows that your public safety is growing. I just also wanted to make sure that I had included all the correct raises or didn't need any additional appropriations out of this fund.
There's going to be a lot of discussion about public safety lit over the next 2 months, probably starting at our work session next Thursday.
Debbie, is it right that we can't take the insurance premium from Safety Lit? Didn't we already talk about that? Do you know? So I think just. Okay.
I don't know, we can take the retirement, so I don't know about the
Okay. Okay.
And he just left.
And, yeah, we just left. So one of those funds will absorb probably general.
The next, the Lit Correctional Rehab Facility, page 10. So again, this is where your bond payment for the jail is coming from. And then also, we had some operating in here. So again, this one's, got $3.3 million. Now we know we can put more operating in here. I don't know what the current conversations are with the jail and pods or anything like that, but
There was a work session that we had with judicial, prosecutors, commissioners, counsel, sheriff, and we will probably meet again in September. There's nothing really moving forward yet, so it's just really kind of a fact-finding information. We'll probably meet again in September, so probably nothing.
so that's one where, we can use it for operating, or if we can use this for a, new pod or addition, expansion, that way I don't know if you can get a pod for $3 million now, but may not be able to borrow it.
We've spent a big chunk of it already. So.
Did you get the additionals in this fund?
I don't have it out of this fund.
It's significant.
700 something.
700 some.
Out of the jail lit? Okay.
Yeah, that would be 1,000.
And that's going to be recurring because a big piece of it was inmate medical, which is an expense that we are having trouble controlling. You could,
Well, then if you look at if you look at line 17, right now, we're only about, $85,000 positive. So taking 700,000, we're going to be eating into that.
it's not
Pretty quickly.
sustainable. Yeah.
No. That's going to last for about 4 years, maybe 5, with hoping the income tax continues to increase.
The rental payment's stationary, right? I mean, that bond we said, it's
Yeah.
1.721
Yeah, that's pretty-
from here that will not.
Right.
So if we don't build a pod, it's appropriate to use down those funds because we really have more than we need. But if we do think at some point we're going to, then,
We're
right,
going to have to look at what other revenue
right,
stream we have.
that will have to be resolved.
Or move all these expenses to the general fund and other funds, and then use this for the,
The last bond that we obligated was November 2022, and that was for the 3 buildings, the majority of the courthouse. And I think that payment, we pay that off January 2027.
Right.
At that time, you said that we were probably at our limit, or maxed out at that time. I know we've been paying down the different bonds since then, but that's only been 2 years, so we've not paid down that much. Are we still pretty much at our limit and needing to wait until 27 before we make significant?
Well, you're still pretty close to your general obligation debt limit, but we can issue bonds and fund a project above that. We just have to go through a lease financing, just like you did the Justice Center, just like you did the jail.
Right.
So I wouldn't, from a legal term, it's a little bit more complicated, but from finance, it works the same way.
So when we bring in Lisa Lee and,
Yeah.
But it would cause our tax rate to go up.
Yeah, it would.
Because generally, we do a tax-neutral general obligation bond, yeah.
We would try to, if we did it now, it might increase for a couple years, but we would try to, like we've done in the past, structure it so the impact to the taxpayer is minimal as possible.
well, I think when we did the courthouse, the three, we said we wanted it tax neutral, and I
Yep.
think we worked it
Right.
successfully to achieve a tax neutral for the taxpayer.
Yeah. So we'll add that additional appropriation to the lit fund. So that, like I said, knowing that, that's going to drive this balance down. Next,
Those are the two additionals that we did, one for the one health and then the other as well.
657,000 for the lit, and the health was 23,000.
You took 50,000 out for something.
Yes, we over budgeted, we thought, for utilities, and hoping we don't have to allocate more to it later.
The next schedule, on page 11, is the statewide 911 fund. So this is the one where I wanted to see if this budget had been, because right now we're showing that we're going to end the year at negative $500,000, but I don't think we're showing that this budget being adjusted at all for moving things to the public safety access.
Yeah, the PSAP, I said, right, my recollection of bringing in 1.1 million annually.
Yeah, so if you look at page 12, the next page, you're exactly right. We've got 1.1 million coming in. Debbie said we did an additional appropriation of about 900,000 to be paid out of that. I didn't know if that additional appropriation, if we should have reduced the statewide 911 by 900,000. Okay.
That should be very close to their actual expenses. Unless
When we talked to Debbie earlier, she wasn't for sure if we should change that, so we hadn't, but we'll do that going forward. So that'll make the 911, should be positive after that.
Yeah, we'll remove that red highlighting as well. Then the health department, make us feel better at least.
And then your PSAP, Public Safety Access Point, you can see there, based upon that budget growing, you should have enough revenue coming in. And with those budgets, we've covered all the raises that were approved. Okay.
Well, that's what I was very interested in seeing because,
Yeah, the raises, we moved over into a kind of a set aside in the general fund, and we shorted that jail lit because of the law issue. Yeah, so then that was why the additional went back into the jail lit.
Okay.
So the raises were covered.
that CCD a year ago in their report had it going significantly in the red.
Yes, yeah.
We made some adjustments at budget time. It looks like that stopped that red ink, that bleeding, quite a bit.
The next is CUNCAP development. Again, this is mostly capital projects, but you can use it for some operating, but healthy balance, but that's something you can move some expenses from your general fund or some others over here that qualify if need be.
That was the one where a year ago, it was heading quickly and dramatically in the red. And I think we made multiple adjustments to move things around. They said stop the bleeding there, so it looks like that was successful.
The next are the highway fund. I know this is a fund that you kind of spend money based upon what you have. So again, if you look at that, the trend is going down, based upon your current budget. It did increase quite a bit from 23 to 24. So that's something that we need to be looking at if you do spend all your budget.
They have, I'm the liaison on that department, they have said they'd much rather, instead of building balances, they'd much rather fix the roads, pave the roads. I think they're on top of it.
And the only thing, well, to be careful, and I know the highway and local road and street, but a lot of their budget is based upon personal services in here, so we'll have to we'll have to watch that. And then page 15 is your MVH restricted, so it has a balance, but again, that's all kind of new projects. But again, yeah, that's fun where we typically try to spend what you have to make improvements within the county. Page 16 is local road and street. Again, kind of typically spend what you have. And then wheel tax, which you've historically have had a healthy balance in there. And this is one where in 2024 you had a 2.3 budget for capital outlays, and then I kind of just decreased it to 1.8 to kind of match what you're bringing in for the next couple of years. But you can see that just keeps an ending balance around $900,000 you could spend throughout that time. And then page 18 is the self-insurance. I didn't know if I need to make any changes to this, if there's any more current information or not. Okay.
Sorry, I forgot. I think it's going up 1% increase.
For
But I have
25 or for this year?
for 25.
Okay.
I have a meeting with him on Thursday to discuss some other things, so I'll get better numbers for you.
What was that percent again? I didn't catch it.
1.
1%.
Well, that sounds good. That's unheard of, but that sounds wonderful.
Jason, do you have a recommendation for what the operating balance should be?
For the self-insurance?
Yeah.
Just, I'm looking at historical here. Thank you. I would say that 25 to 30% is still good.
What was your question?
I asked if you had a recommendation for what the operating balance should be on the insurance fund.
And you said it's pretty healthy
Yeah.
with your
Said
projections.
25 to
25 to
30%
30.
is still.
Okay. we're
'Cause
in-
that's unfortunately, as you well know, that's a fund that can change pretty drastically.
Very quickly.
It can change $1 million in
Very
the
quickly.
snap of a finger, which it did in 19.
And that's what I'm saying, that 30% is a little over $1 million.
Yeah, we didn't have that buffer back then.
Page 19, this is Cume Bridge. This is another one where, this isn't within your maximum levy. So again, this is one where, a lot of times you accumulate funds and then do large projects for a bridge project. So right now, I just have your budget for capital outlays in 2024 was $710,000. I kept that the same for 2025, and then it drops off, just so you have a budget of basically zero. So that was one I didn't know if you have a kind of a long-term plan for bridges.
We need a long-term plan every year.
Joe was moving money. Remember the last commissioners meeting?
He's given
moving
us- yep.
money into that to get it increased, because that doesn't even cover one bridge.
So when you're,
We have 140.
He has a long-term plan.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes, he has a
Something like
5-year
that,
plan.
So
and you said he's moving money, so does he have money from other places that he can
I
use?
can't remember now what it was he said he was going to do, but it was going to put quite a bit into that. because of the money we have now. Like I said, we can't even do one bridge.
Well, see, that's something I wanted to talk about, because by putting money in it, if he means like levy, that means we have to take it away from somewhere else.
I think he's actually, I don't think that's putting money in it. He's using, it was the NDH fund or
I
whatever.
think so.
He was, yeah, he was rotating something so that,
I think, I'll get you a copy. I
I'll say
have
we'll
a
get-
copy of what he was talking
because
about.
he had information on that, because he was trying to get that up because the two bridges that we're doing, we didn't have near enough money to cover them. And one of them, Community Crossings, was going to take care of, so
And I can't remember the number of bridges that he said
140
Yeah,
bridges, I think
140
we have in the
bridges.
county that
are needing.
we need to do something with. So if we don't do something, we're not going to have any money to fix any of the bridges.
He's mentioned for 3 years, it's tremendously inadequate. But I know every time I've brought it up, the maximum levy issue, that you're going to rob Peter to pay Paul. So that's why we need that long-term plan, as Shannon mentioned, to be able to fund this. I mean, he's going after federal NDOT monies for one of the significant bridges on the east side. This is just, as Steve said, it's grossly inadequate given the number of bridges and their condition.
Well, and if he's using money from MVH, then we'll need to look at, if you look at line, or page 14 and 15, you can see there's not a lot there to take from. So we'll want to kind of think about how
He had some sort of plan that he was talking to us about, that he was wanting to look at doing, that was going to help kind of.
So if you want me to incorporate that in here, I'd be happy to do that, because I think it would probably be good to help you with the bridges, because I know that's becoming a more and more difficult task for counties, and I'm working on one right now. It's by the Covered Bridge Festival over on this, and they're starting to do bonds just for bridges because they just can't keep up, and I mean, they're having to close some of them.
Park County?
Well, it's not Park, but
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
yeah. So I know the strain you guys are going through, just talking to other counties too.
It sounds like the commissioners or Debbie can give you that information, that plan.
I think we would like to see that in here, and then also talk about a long-term plan. I mean, was it 2030 or 2032? We have to have that big chunk of dollars for that other bridge. And we talked about it at budget time. We better start a savings plan to get there, and it was.
I think that was part of the 5-year plan.
Is that part of his plan?
Yeah, and I think he might be using some of the plan on using some of the community.
Yeah, he was.
He was, yeah. I'll say
That's
that
going
was
to
always gonna- I know he's
impact
using-
budget and the.
Almost
5-year
$500,000,
plan.
wasn't it? Now, the 1.5, almost $500,000 was for a bridge. And the
And
rest
part of
for
it was the one on
repaving.
Garner Street was the one that he was using this year.
Right. Because when they close down Broad Street, it's going to be a tremendous number of traffic on Garner, going to the hospital, whatever, and it's in bad shape. A hole in the middle of it.
Jason, one of the other things that we talked about was possibly setting up a fund like the insurance fund for covering our insurance deductible, which went from $25,000 for liability up to $150,000. So it'll be harder to absorb those payouts without a fund. So that's something we need to incorporate too, figuring out what kind of balance we need to maintain over time and funding that.
Yeah, but I hate to put money into the rainy day fund and then
Take it right back
Yeah.
out.
that kind of defeats the purpose. So you might as well just pick what fund you want to spend it out of and just start having that be a budget line item.
We did put money in the rainy day fund. I don't remember the amount, but it was the first time we put a significant amount in 5 years.
You know what, yeah, and I didn't include that in here. Brandon took that
I
out.
don't remember what that was.
Most of it came back out then for
I think so. It was in and then it was out.
audio or something over.
Just exactly what you advised against.
Yeah, it went in and came back out.
Well, those are all the funds that we looked at. I made some comments, and Debbie, thank you for sitting in this, so we'll make those changes.
So you're going to get with Angela and the commissioners, or Debbie's going to get with you on the plan from the highway department. Be a good time, council, to ask Jason for questions.
Back on page 13, the cumulative capital development.
Yeah.
Debbie, this is the account you were talking to me about.
That we're worried about, is there's just not much in it, and it's already been, it's been in the negative for several months.
Yeah, we've been,
Is
we've
it a
been trying.
timing issue, or is it,
No,
Could be, but it's been a long time since we've ran one in the red, and it just doesn't seem like it's, and we have it maxed out. It just doesn't seem like it's there, like we're concerned about it, and maybe we're.
because it's like 40, is it 40? I haven't looked at this month's.
I mean, right now-
We've been pulling stuff out and not paying out of this fund and paying it out of other funds. Because we're worried about the amount that's coming in settlement.
I mean, right now, it looks like you're gonna be bringing in about $600,000 for a year, and you've only budgeted 540. So I don't know if it is a timing issue.
I think it's a timing
lot of
issue.
expenses are being-
It's just, we haven't been, since 19, we haven't ran it in the red at the fund, and that's just what has us concerned, but now we're back to running it in the red for something.
On your budget summary last August, Jason, that was showing, as I said, dipping significantly lower and lower into the deficit category. And we adjusted, 270,000, I think, to stop the bleeding. I'm not sure that's gone through the cycle yet to show up.
One thing that has saved you is, again, the QCAP development, it's rate driven, so it's, as your assessed value increases, you generate more revenue. So that has helped you, so that you got extra $70,000-$80,000 this year because of the increase in assessed value. So that's,
I think she went to go look. I
If-
think she went to go get the numbers on
If
it.
by August that's still showing going in the red, I think we need to budget time,
yeah.
look at that even further. But I do know we made some measures to try to stop that bleeding. And it was significant at the time, we thought. I just don't know if it's gone through the budget cycle to show up yet.
Just a couple other things, just wanted to highlight page 22. This is that schedule that you've seen before. We've talked about income taxes. So this lists your various income taxes that you have. And as you know, under the expenditure rate, the max that you can levy is 2.5%. And so you have 0.95% remaining that you could levy in any of these buckets: certified shares, public safety, economic development, jails,
I think at
the
our
judicial.
work sessions, we've been eyeing EMS because we're responsible for $300,000 annually to Newcastle to provide ALS for the county as by law. I know judicial, they've trimmed that down, what it could be used for considerably,
Yeah,
but
they have.
that would help the general fund if there was something there. And then, of course,
Yeah.
the fire departments are knocking on our door. And public safety, our inmate medical's out of whack right now. We're going to have to look at all those. We've already discussed some of that. Next Thursday's work session, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, we're going to be looking at that as it heads into our August budget time, trying to juggle all that.
Yeah. No, I've talked to a lot of other counties, and I think EMS is what other counties are looking at, and then public safety as well. I'm working for another county on the west side of the state. They're having us do an entire staffing study for their entire county, because not only the county, but the cities, well, they have one city and the rest towns, they're understaffed, so they're looking at where they're at and where they should be, because they're thinking about increasing public safety to help all layers of government. So it's something that, and I think you asked me what's the average for the last couple of years, and it's been ticking up. I don't see that trend changing.
Yeah, I've noticed it's like, 0.2, 0.3, 0.5, or put a 0 in front of that. But, every year it's gone up some, the state average, but it's a balance. And again, we have to be cognizant of the taxpayers. We're not the wealthiest county by far. So,
And then the last thing I just wanted to bring up, and it was already kind of addressed earlier, the last couple of schedules are the bonds that are outstanding. Really, none of them can be refinanced at this point. and the rates are really still really good. They wouldn't be worth refinancing. But if you look at the very last page, page 28, it was mentioned you guys did issue a general obligation bond in 2022. It does mature in January 2027. So if there are capital projects that you wanted to fund, you know, we could start looking at, you know, doing a bond issue here in the next year or so to help pay for those.
What happened to our 2% interest rates? The last one was 3.85. That's a rhetorical question.
Yeah.
And that I know the answer to. We won't go there. It was nice when we had 2% interest rates. We could do a lot bang for the buck and,
Yeah.
or paying on our 5.1, $350,000 in interest. That hurts.
Jason, are there maximums on the 6 options under the LITs? Certified chairs, public safety, economic development? Yeah, just a total
2.5.
Total 2.5,
Well,
so you could put.
I take that back. EMS is maxed up at 0.2. And the jail is, you guys are maxed at 0.3. You're at 0.2, but you could go up to 0.3.
Yeah, that was part of that clarification when
And
we.
EMS is 0.2 and judicial is 0.2. But economic development, public safety, and certified chairs, there's no limit on that.
Questions? You've given us a lot to mull over. Commissioners?
Well, the only question I have, you said you have a work session next Thursday on the 16th?
It's the
Oh, that's,
23rd.
no, next Thursday is the 23rd. Sorry, I am a week behind. My
Yeah,
fault.
Yeah, next
Yep.
Thursday.
Okay, next Thursday, not Thursday. Okay. That's right.
So I'm trying to think ahead just for your budget. I think if we included all the salaries and all the additional appropriations, I mean, are there any other additional appropriations besides the park that you think we should include?
Have we addressed all the sheriff jail?
There could be additional inmate medical beyond what we gave you. There could be additional jail lit beyond the 650 that we just handed you.
I have the dollar amount for the insurance premiums if you want it. It's $230,546 was the estimate. I know. That's the total. I'm talking about the difference. Difference between what we got in budget.
So that would come out of the general?
I think we have to decide that, but that's really the only place it can come out.
It was 44,000 in the sheriff's budget, but when they use it, because they always pay their own stuff, so there's 44,000.
Is the rest in the commissioners?
Then if you wanted to get a total of when we can get you that total of risk exposure currently for all the deductibles for any of the tort claims, we can get you that total. I don't have a good number right now because I'd have to look at the timing of different things that have been filed, but what it would potentially be.
I mean, I need to put on all these changes, but I'd say you're still looking pretty good. What scares me is that $700,000 of the jail lit that's going to hit us in 4 or 5 years, because then after that,
We're done.
We started spending out of that and budgeted out of that, knowing that it was not sustainable. We will not run it into the ground.
That was a stopgap. We have to fix it.
It sat there accumulating dollars and not being spent for a while, so.
But I just don't know if we'll have anywhere, once that runs out, where's it going to come from? That's my concern. And we can kind of, and that's kind of beyond our reports out to 2028, 2029, where we're really going to see it. And normally that wouldn't concern me, but I'm just trying to think, if you want to give raises this year,
We need to have that in the back of our mind.
do you want us to show what that might look like in our next scenario? I can, if you have something that you want to look at, I can.
Susan?
I think
Was
that,
having a heart attack.
It's still May, it's still May.
The nurse,
I'm just trying to help you guys make a decision, so you have all. as much
yes, we
information.
are probably going to give raises.
we, yeah, something, but that information would be valuable. This is
Your-
valuable, but that would be valuable because it's, and if our nurse is going to have a stroke, I hope your comrade there knows.
We're waiting right now on
CPR.
revised job classification information from WIS, and we will take it to decide what we need to do to adjust
You
wages.
want to wait till you have that information and we can adjust it.
Well, we won't get that until late June or July, I mean.
I would say it's going to be at least 5% more at a minimum,
Yeah, I think we'll definitely want to see that because,
and that doesn't mean that we're going to do it. I'm just saying that when we get that report back, I wouldn't expect it to be any less than 5% on average. I don't know. What do you guys think?
What does the 5% represent?
I was just saying, if you averaged out the recommended wage, it's gonna have to be at least 5% more on average for the recommended wage. I'm not saying we're gonna give the recommended wage, I'm just saying it will have to be that at least, based on how low we are now.
Yeah, I would like the additional information before talking an amount. That would be in the ideal world. I'm just not sure we're dealing with ideal numbers.
would it be helpful if I showed what I have now with the changes, just to show what the ending balances will look like, and then below that, kind of a scenario B that shows what it would look like with the 5%, just so you can see the difference.
Well, last year, I
In
think
and out.
we were talking about a 4 and 5, and I think on
Or I can do 3.
August 10th, Debbie did a 4% column and a 5% column. And
Whether you do 3, 4, or 5, it's gonna give us an idea. So I think it's helpful to see it, just to picture what a raise would do
Wait.
over the next 5 years.
Because I think 25 and 26 may look okay, but still when you start getting to 27, that's where I'm
right, I'm concerned about that as well.
Suggesting that that 700,000, I think that's what Shannon said as well, is going to, or I won't say all of the 700,000, much of the 700,000 that was appropriated in the jail lit is going to come out of the jail lit. Is that what you said, Shannon?
Yeah, there's no way
So
we
that'll
can
have to go back
continue
into
to spend
the
that.
general,
Right, but they'll have to be paid out of this.
the general.
Yes, those expenses would either have to come out of general, or we got to find a way to not have them, yeah.
Or increase jail lit, though, then there's restrictions on operating expenses, so.
See, I think
Yeah.
with just the changes that we're making now, our general fund's going to start decreasing.
Yep.
Even without any kind of raises. So that's why I think it'd be good to show.
I think it would be
what
excellent to
would
show
raises
that.
To show how much quicker.
I mean, we've tried to do 3% over the last, and in fact, Debbie's mentioned when they do the budget request to do 3%. Last year was an exception to the rule. Prior to that, we tried to literally balance the budget. But by doing so, we've seen the general fund increase balance, and we finally decided enough's enough. Our employees have been paying the price for us building this up and not getting rewarded for it, but it's a balancing act. But I agree, ideally, it would be nice to be able to catch up with the other counties, but I don't know that we'll ever be able to do that to the degree we'd like to. They deserve it, but we don't have the funds necessarily to do what some of these other counties are doing. We wish. And that's just my opinion. I'm 1/7 of this group.
Would you want me to show kind of like a scenario B, kind of show what that would look like and
As you described it, I would. Go ahead.
do the 5%?
I'd like to see it.
It's just informational, yeah, so to me, it's helpful.
Thank you very much.
Is there anything else that,
I'll get you the numbers.
Listen, you're going to get
I
with
can get you
Angela,
the stuff from the
'cause
Joe.
make sure she doesn't have a stroke.
I do have a question, I guess, back on page 5. 2023 actuals for line item 12. earnings on investments came in at $1.883 million, which we got to give kudos to our treasurer for staying on top of that. But for 2024, you've got it at 492, 560, going back down considerably. Are you why did you make that assumption, I guess?
Just because I don't think you're going to be able to earn as much interest as we had last year. I still think it's going to be quite a bit just because you have a nice healthy balance of $6 million. But yeah, I'm just, again, kind of being conservative. I mean, right now rates are still pretty good, but not as high as they were.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I just felt like with more dollars accumulating, I felt it would be a little higher than.
And that might be
what it is.
a little conservative.
Okay.
If you want me to bump it up, I can. But
I'm just curious, do you know what rates you used to get there?
We kind of took like a percentage, really. I can't remember exactly what rate we did use.
Okay.
Good catch. Our treasurer does shop around,
No, that's good.
and it's been beneficial for that to occur. I think we haven't heard about settlement yet, so they're still working overtime in different departments, including Debbie's and the treasurer and everybody working together. It's a village. But I think, I know they tapped it at 4%, but it's looking fairly healthy. Other questions? We have another part of this work session involving the expo. So any other questions for? Thank you. And would be anxious to hear the Plan B and you getting with the people we talked about. But this helps us, the roadmap, as we prepare for budgets and have discussions. It helps immensely. And your conservative numbers help too, because it's kept us growing our balances where it wasn't such a rosy picture you painted in 2019, was it? It's pretty dismal. We were in the red,
Yep.
and we worked our way out, but you've helped us work our way out, so appreciate it.
You want me to stay for the next part?
That's up to you. I don't know if it's going to involve anything relating to you or not. It's on the Expo project, soon to be renamed, I think, but.
Well, if there's anything else that you do need, that we'll make these changes and
Okay,
talk to the various groups.
thank you very much.
Thank you.
You and
And
your colleagues.
I have contacted the bank about the food and beverage. So I do have current balances and some projections, so we can.
Okay, my projection would be have about 2 million left by this fall. I don't know if that's, but
That's pretty close, yeah.
Yeah.
Looking at what you currently have and what you still have yet to be paid.
and there's this thing called Ready 2.0 that they're being eyeing at as some of our 50% match.
Yeah. Okay. I'll probably call you once
Brianna, Duke, if you want to come up where Jason is and bring your, you might bring your microphone from the podium up here. Yeah, bring it up here where Jason and our attorney was. Are you part of this group? Okay. Appreciate it, Jason. We got the report from Dan Wright. I don't have anything preconceived other than listening to an update. Steve and I were part of the foundation, and you were there, as I recall, at the REMC last September. A lot of discussion, a lot of good talk. One of the things came out of it, we need to rebrand the name of it because the expo has just needs to be rebranded. I'm going to turn it over to you, and I'm sure there's going to be some Q&A, and from what I've heard, there's people listening that are very curious about why we're even talking about this. So it's yours, because I believe you're president of the Expo board, if I'm not mistaken. Church Green.
Should be green. I'm not the president. J.R. Martin's still president. So We did talk about a name change. When I talked to David Terrell, who was the mediator that led the meeting at the RMC, he suggested we wait till we had a few things figured out and kind of roll it out as part of a plan, a PR plan, financial, all those sorts of things. So we are not opposed to changing the name. We're just kind of trying to get a few of our ducks in a row before we kind of use that as our rebrand. We're still here, we're still working hard, sort of, and then here's our plan. Like, we want to know, we want to have a plan before we start all that. As far as updates, one thing I do want to make very clear, the Expo did apply for the Ready 2.0, but we applied specifically for a water infrastructure project. We did not apply specifically for construction, mostly because that's our biggest hurdle right now is getting the right water infrastructure to the Expo. When I applied for Ready, I didn't just apply for water for the Expo. I included all the entities there, the Saddle Club, the park, and the golf course, bringing sufficient water to all of them, because they all struggle. In my conversations with them all, they all struggle with having the right water pressure. So my application, although the Expo we are the applicant, it was for water for the whole area, not just us.
Now, was it specifically water? Did you address sewer as well, or is it specifically just water? Because you mentioned infrastructure.
Yeah, water and sewer infrastructure. We did not have Dan's numbers when we applied, unfortunately. It just didn't happen fast enough. So I kind of ballparked it. I was pretty close. So we do feel that if, this water infrastructure project is something, we do feel it aligns with the Ready Grants vision for the area. That area is kind of the center of quality of life for Henry County. You have your golf course, your park, a saddle club. So if we are going to enhance the area by building the Expo, let's enhance all those entities with the right water capacity. So I just want to make that clear. A lot of people say, the Expo applied for the Ready grant, but we didn't do it specifically for construction, just for the water infrastructure.
My understanding, the park also submitted a Ready, and was it overlapping what you're just talking about?
Yeah, so I went to the park and they said, look, we need more than one egg in this basket. So I asked them to apply also for the same type of water project. They had numbers previously from the same engineering company, did a water engineering report and cost estimate for the park back at the beginning of, or mid-2022, I think, somewhere in there. So they had some numbers to kind of go by, but we kind of did it really fast because I thought if the Expo didn't make the top 10, maybe the park would make the top 10, and we'd have more eggs in the basket.
You came in number 10, because I said on that. But it didn't, they're looking at the top 5 is what they're looking at. You didn't make top 10 out of the 24 that were submitted. So that's just an FYI.
And I've had some discussions with Corey Murphy over that. Obviously, all the projects are deserving. We're just, so many people want this project to move forward, but that is our biggest hurdle. It was never bringing the right water capacity to the Expo was never part of our original cost estimates. So it is a cost beyond what we estimated or budgeted for reasons I'm sure people have heard, but that's, and because through my reading the Ready Grant and being at the Ready Grant meetings, a water infrastructure project aligns more with what they want to fund, and so we felt that was our best approach.
And you've received, if I'm not mistaken, I think you were forwarded this FPPH, Dan Wright. So his recommendation to connect to the Newcastle Municipal Water, and speaking with the mayor last week, because this week, no, it's Monday, last week at the EDC meeting, what they're constructing now is to bring that 12-inch line that runs on the east side of 3 at the bottom of the Sulphur Springs Road, I think it is 100 North, under 3, and I
Which
think
is fantastic.
200 feet, is that what?
250 feet.
250 feet
Mhm.
at the cost of, I don't know, 100 and some odd $1,000. Now, reading Dan's report, part of this that's connected to the city line, I know the mayor has wanted to do water over at Wildwood Estates, which is that housing subdivision right underneath the, right south of the highway.
Yeah, so they don't have enough water capacity either, and I think, from my understanding, it raises their fire insurance rates, or it raises the county's fire insurance rates. If you talk to some of those people who live there, they would like better water for multiple reasons, but also because of their fire insurance rates. And that is, I included that in part of our READY application, that bringing water to the whole area benefits multiple entities, multiple people, groups, whatever you want to call them.
He shows a map of what they're proposing near the end, I believe, for water and sewer. And the water was to connect through the highway department to Wildwood Estates. One of the things in the Stellar, because I sat on that back in 2019, was a request for a water tower to meet the water pressure needs, which is substandard in Wildwood Estates, which I guess the city annexed back in the early 2000s. And the water line would go from what they're digging under 3 right now up the hill to support the park, Memorial Park, because it's inadequate, over to Saddle Club and the Expo Center, and then cut through the east side of the highway department to connect so that Wildwood Estates, which is inadequate water pressure, would be serviced by this project as well.
Yeah, so we received that report the same time it was emailed to you all from Corey Murphy. So we have not been able to discuss it as a board. We've taken the time to review it, but we have some significant questions that we want to address with Dan about not all the numbers, but there's just some things that we're not clear on. So that would be our next step, is to try and get a meeting set up with Dan and really go through some of these numbers. And we would like for anyone from the council or commissioners who would want to be in that conversation, that'd be helpful too. But we really haven't had a chance to really look through it. Because I guess we got it Thursday evening. So we got it the same time that y'all did. So,
Do you agree with the figures that Dan put in his report on page 16 that indicates to date $2,581,000 has been spent in this project?
yeah, I mean, I don't know to the dollar, but that's very close. I know about 1.1 was spent on site preparation, laying the electrical for the light posts and clearing the land for construction. The one shelter that we removed and replaced was about $80,000. We also paid up. Our contractor came to us when he started to see construction materials go up in early 21. I think I was not on the board at the time, but and he suggested we buy a lot of our materials ahead. So there's on the graph or the chart about finishing the current building, I think it's like $682,000. He has about $100,000 in there on drywall and drywall hanging. We've purchased all our drywall, so that's one of those kind of questions that we need to address with him. If that number includes those products, like we've bought all of our insulation, we've bought most of our HVAC supplies. So those are some of the questions that we still need to address with him, where he's coming from. Now, he was given all the information that we have to date, and this information he was given, but $107,000 to hang drywall is way over what our contractor had estimated. So there's just a few things in there that we really want to address before we
So
can.
you're saying he may be estimating on the high side from what you have other quotes or estimates from?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's $218,000 for materials that you bought ahead of time, electrical, rough end, insulation, drywall. You've already purchased the HVAC system.
Yes, my understanding, we have paid, we have bought all the HVAC supplies. We're just at this point responsible for labor, and part of the labor is donated through the company that's doing it. So, like I said, we would like to talk to Dan before these numbers go public, because
Well, my understanding is the foundation, and I don't see anyone here from the foundation, is still planning on a follow-up in the near future. I think that term is correct, near future, with the same parties that were there in September, plus all the commissioners and all the council. And I mean, the foundation has paid, well, the foundation put a lot of money into this initially, and that's why they had this form back in September. They didn't want the $2.5 million just to sit and rot and
right.
maybe have to pay
Yeah.
$150,000 to
The foundation
demolish
has
it.
been incredible through this process. They brought us to the table, basically, and wanted an update, and kind of said, we want to help you figure this out. So that's when we proceeded with the stakeholders meetings. The REMC, they hired David Terrell out of Ball State to kind of be a mediator or lead the discussion. And then they hired FPBH to do the engineering report. The engineering report is paid through funds that were pledged to the expo through the foundation. So that is part of our pledged funds. Does that make sense? The foundation paid for David Terrell to lead the meetings, but the report is paid out of money that it was pledged through the foundation to the expo that they still owe the expo.
Do you have a balance of, after this report, do you have a balance of any kind of monies for the project? The expo
From the
board?
foundation, or?
Well, that I don't know. I mean, or the monies that you've had donated, and apparently 2.5 million, I think 1 point something was from the county, left over from the voting machines, didn't come in nearly as expensive as thought. It was originally to the park, and then there was meetings in 2017, and one thing led to another. But anyway, it was decided to move that over to the expo. I don't think there was any estimation of over $1 million for excavation work, but given where it was placed in the final analysis versus, let's say, Cardinal Field, that was already level, cost skyrocketed, estimates skyrocketed, COVID came in, et cetera, et cetera. Anything that could possibly go wrong, it was a perfect storm of wrongness that occurred. Plus, you have people living online that's upset about the Doughboy, et cetera, and I'm sure they're listening in now, and I could care less.
Yes, we do have some really good book-faced friends who, but I like to read the comments. I don't normally respond. I'm not going to stir up anything, but from some of the latest posts that I've seen and comments, there's just not a lot of truth to what they're saying. So I want to caution people from, and I guess this goes for probably all parts of our life, trusting what people say on the internet. One of the concerns, I think, is that we as in the Expo's taken land from the park. We are currently working on a amendment to our lease. We are going to give a portion of what is on the south side. Originally, we have 60-ish acres in our lease, and we're going to return the majority of that and keep about the 10 to 12 acres that the Expo sits on.
And you're working with Commissioner Dellinger on that. Is there progress being made on that, or that? Okay, I take that as an affirmative. There's
Yeah, as far
progress
as-
being made, and it
Yeah.
looks like I don't know how much you were in the original lease. It was a big swath, if I'm not mistaken, negotiated by previous commissioners.
Yeah,
And
and I
you're
think a lot
talking-
of that was just making sure there was enough parking. They wanted to use the pond for geothermal heat. Turned out it's not deep enough to do that. So there's a lot of things, that was anticipated that kind of brought us to this point where we don't really need the whole footprint. The park would like it back in our discussions with the park. And, we are working it out so that if we do need the extra parking or do need the shelters or whatnot, that we are able to acquire them and rent them, just like anyone else would be able to rent that space.
I've been listening to commissioners' meetings online. I know there's one shelter that's been an issue. Is that being worked out, or, it's minor compared with the big issue of the project as a whole, but it's not minor to the family that it affects. Steve, you shook your head again.
I would rather not comment on anything that we're trying to get worked out because it seems to stir up more angst and problems every
Well,
time
there's-
somebody brings something up. So
Oh, well.
until we have something definitive to say,
Okay,
the less
understood.
that's commented and the less that's
Yeah.
discussed is probably
Well.
the best course of action at this point.
Understood, and I'm sure if Kyle were here, he would say that legally you probably are taking the wise path. So, the angst has already been stirred, and it'll be stirred up as we speak. It's being stirred up, and it'll be stirred up after we speak. But proceed.
Yeah, so we have presented to the commissioners our proposed changes to the lease. And as far as I know, most of the questions have been addressed. And we're just looking for the next step, I guess, on how we move forward. Whether we need to have a work session or get the attorneys involved, I'm not really sure on the process, so I leave it up to them to kind of tell me.
We'll leave that up to the attorneys and the commissioners.
Yeah.
The council's main role is to look at possible financing. Ready's out there, but I know they've already, like I said, the Expo did not make the top 5. They made the top 10.
That can be changed. It can be changed.
Yes.
There's no definite yet.
We can't change it. Anybody sitting here probably, other than Corey has said that it appears like there's not a unified support for it among the elected officials here. And that may change, it may not change. I can't only speak for 1/10 of the officials here. His estimate is 2.1 million for water and sewer. Parking could be later. Parking, if it's asphalt like he recommends, it's over $1.5 million. Then the interior completions, $680,000 to fix all the things that are not, actually the drywall and the electrical and actually hooking up the HVAC, insulate, all that stuff on the interior is
But like I s-
$680,000.
But like I said, we've purchased, prepaid for a lot of that. I know the drywall and the insulation. So I'm curious where he's brought in that number.
So you guys have not met with Dan or had any meetings with FBPH to explain any of these numbers? They could change. They haven't been officially presented, although you've gotten the report, kind of like we got the report.
Yeah.
There hasn't been any official presentation and discussion about these numbers.
Yeah. So our initial concerns, we tried to reach out to Dan, but we were kind of put on hold because the foundation wanted to discuss it first.
Sure, well, they paid for this,
Yeah,
and they put a lot of money, we respect that.
yeah,
I would say probably before we're just kind of getting a feel for what the Expo Board, officially, there's this that the foundation's paid for. It sounds like they're planning in the near future. I cannot define near. Another follow-up with Dan. I know Steve can share also. I thought the meetings that David Terrell put on, he's very professional. He brought some people together that don't always see eye to eye, and there was no brawl, there was no blood. There was actually good, healthy conversations.
Yeah.
Give and take, disagreeable. We didn't get disagreeable. We disagreed on some things, but it was healthy and it was positive. And this is one of the results of that meeting. We know some of the community, again, it seemed to dovetail off the doughboy, went up to the person involved, to the project of the person involved. It's a graduate dissertation on sociological, whatever. But building interior completion, you said you think that's on the high side, and then soft costs, which he lists, that comes to $927,000. So you add that to the $2.1 million for the water and sewer, we're up to $3 million, and that doesn't include the $1.5 million for the parking, which, he talks about dividing this into 4 segments. In other words, you don't eat an elephant at one time. It's one bite at a time. It looks like he suggested to break it into water, sewer, building, and parking lot in that. And you said you and the park applied to Ready for water and sewer, both of you. And it looks like from his drawings that the water and sewer for the park and you can kill 2 birds with 1 stone. What he's projecting here with those costs that I mentioned would handle both the park, which have needs, and the expo or whatever it's going to be called. Could be handled. It was 2 separate requests, but this would handle both of those. It would address both of those issues. So I'm doing most of the talking, but I served on the Ready, and I was at the REMC meetings. This is going to require funding of some source. The council is charged with funding. The next time we have a chunk of money outside of Ready, and that's not ours, it's just we have to do the match. We're looking at $2 million, and we were advised at our meeting last week that we converse with the Food and Beverage Advisory Committee, and people can listen online where that went. But we have to make a decision on food and beverage, that charge is given to us by the legislature. I think the next step is whatever the foundation decides to do with that follow-up with David Terrell, and then whatever the Ready Committee and the East Central Indiana 8 counties decide, and along with the Indiana Economic Development Corp. There's a lot of pieces to this chess puzzle.
Yeah, so in my discussions with Corey, here in the next couple weeks, the IEDC and the Eastern Regional
Partnership.
Yes, they are going to start looking at the projects and helping pick. So it's going to come down from a state level, and I know there's a top 5. And like Corey said, even if they're in the top 5, it doesn't mean they get funded. But my hope is that we can shed some light on the Expo project, get it moved up, the water project, get that moved up on the list of priorities so we can move forward. We have confidence that once we can see the path for the water infrastructure, we can make a plan for the rest of it. And we're just kind of in a holding period a little bit. Foundation's been excellent in giving us guidance. giving us information. They prepared me for the ready. So our next meeting, stakeholder meeting, is going to be pretty vital in that. And I do hope it is soon.
Well, I know on the food and beverage, the expo came in number 13. Now, we were able to secure with Joel's blessings the actual vote, and 6 out of 8 would have put this at number 3 out of the 29 projects. And two people, one person moved it from number 3 to number 8, and the second person moved it from number 8 to number 13. I will simply say that all the top 10 were funded on food and beverage by the committee.
Yeah, I was not on the board at the time during the food and beverage process. But I know that it was quite a blow to the group. It kind of scattered our brains on how do we move forward. A lot of the fundraising slowed significantly down during the COVID shutdowns. And so a lot of that, coupled with the outcome of food and beverage, was just kind of tough to swallow, I think, for the expo. But we are positive that we can turn this around. We want to turn it around, but we need help. I mean, we can't do it just on our board alone. We're going to need partnerships through the county and the city. Mayor York putting that pipe under 3 is an immense help to our project. And
It's a win-win. It's going to help him with Wildwood, and it would help with the park and potentially with the expo. But you read his final recommendations, I assume, on page 21. It says, to take a do-nothing approach does not appear to be a viable option. There has already been a large financial investment in this facility, and without completion, that investment is lost. $2.5 million has been put into that. And I know there's people listening who just soon actually tear it down. The preferred option would be to complete the project based on the scope of work provided in this document. It would be best to separate the project into 4 components we described: water, sewer, which we addressed today especially, building, and then the parking lot being the last. Unfortunately, seeking available funding sources will take significant time to complete and would require significant planning and the need for a grant writer and financial consultant, which we do have in ARA, if it were decided after the foundation meets to move the needle, and the cooperation of several of the local governmental entities. It is our opinion that the best case scenario for completion and occupation is approximately 2 years, unless a significant amount of funding can be sourced elsewhere. And that could be Ready, the Lily. It could. Our next available, after listening to Jason Simler earlier, our next bond possibility is January 2027. But there's needs all over the place. There's people pounding at the door with needs. So
Sure.
Who knows what that's going to lead to.
Yeah, and one thing to note too is Dan Wright with FPBH. I mean, he's an excellent source on funding water infrastructure projects. I mean, I think that's what they do. I used to work for an engineering company. That's what we did, sewer separation projects. So he would be someone maybe to reference on grant opportunities, ways of funding it. He came to one of our board meetings and went into a little bit of depth into it.
Who's this again?
Dan Wright, he's with
Dan that did the report.
FPBH, yes.
Yeah, and ARA would help too, because he mentioned Okra as a source, and they have an outstanding reputation with Okra in Indiana, at Indianapolis. So they work on that kind of thing as well. And I know they've done the park. I think they've doing a plan that before COVID they said it would be $10,000. We were early on with them, and they're doing it for free. A comprehensive plan for the park. So we do pay them, so but they help us out. They brought in a lot more money than the 10,000 per year we paid for. I'm hoping that some of the other counselors up here have questions.
I'll throw my 2 cents in, and I agree Dan's an excellent source of a lot of information, including funding opportunities. The majority, and I may be speaking out of turn, I'll preface this with this is my understanding, the majority of the kind of thing that he does is for water and sewer utilities, which those grant opportunities come along with passing on a water bill and a sewer bill to the recipients of that. This opportunity doesn't present an opportunity for anybody other than the city of Newcastle to collect on a water and sewer bill, which is okay. Grant opportunities are partials, and funding otherwise comes through loans. There's federal loans available for funding water and sewer projects as well, but they require them to be paid back. That's where it gets tricky, because $2.1 million gets you water and sewer, but then you still have a water and sewer bill to pay, and that's where many of us get hung up, is how is your group going to use that building? How is it going to be sustainable? How is it going to pay the electric bill, gas bill, water bill, sewer bill in the future? And I'm of the belief that no matter what that building's used for, it's going to need water and sewer. I get that. If not, then it's got no reason to be there. Is there a future plan beyond this study to tell us? Because if you guys had magically $4.5 million today and could finish this project to the point that this says, we still don't know if it's sustainable, and you still don't have 4-H barns. So what's the next step for us to understand how this project lives beyond what's described here?
Sure, yeah. So we are working on doing kind of a budget, an insight. And it's going to be a little bit speculative, but it's not that the original performers that were presented pre-COVID still worked. But we're looking at different numbers now. Obviously, construction costs are higher. A lot of things are going to be higher as we move into this. So that's one thing we're working on. And we've been waiting on this report for us to kind of move forward with some of that, to really have a clear picture of how this will perform in the first year, in the first 5 years, 10 years. Knowing all those people who have reached out to us who want to use the facility, I have no doubt in my mind it's going to be utilized. But I'm going to backtrack a little bit. The building that is currently under construction, even though it's not going to house animals, it is still pretty vital to the 4-H program. Kelsey Myers, she's a 4-H educator, and I have had some pretty long discussions because I wanted to see it from her point of view. She was part of this discussion from the very beginning when the 4-H board started doing their research into what they wanted going forward. The current building is classrooms, offices, boardroom. It is a space for the 4-H to have their meetings, to bring in educators, speakers. They would have space to have multiple counties in one spot, which they don't have right now. The 4-H and the park have an understanding with the Smiths building, an MOU. The park, or the 4-H utilized the Smith building 266 times in 2022. So it is not that 4-H can't use this building. I mean, when the Smith building is in use and they can't use it, they have to find an alternate place, and there's not a lot of places large enough. So they find an alternative or they cancel. So from Kelsey's perspective, this is a much needed space for them to grow. I'm not sure if you've ever been to the 4-H offices. They're on the 3rd floor of the health department building. It's quite a hike if you don't take the elevator to get up there. I have a lot of parents who their kids are in 4-H, have no idea where the office is. I offer to run up there and get things for them because they don't know where it is. Don't feel like it's very accessible to them. So it's going to be not only a visible home and a physical home for 4-H, but it gives it an opportunity to expand upon what they're doing. Lots of times, Kelsey goes out of the county to do some of her education. What if we're bringing those kids into our county? We have the space for it. We'll have the technology for it. So it's a vital part of creating a strong 4-H program that's going to grow. I don't know that. It's not that the barns per se are not important, but if we have that building up and ready, we can have tents with gates in them to house the animals for the 4-H fair. We can still have a 4-H fair there while we make a plan for that building.
Have you guys had conversation about wanting the county to support the ongoing operation of the building?
Yeah, you mean like in the future once it's built, how
Right.
that looks? We haven't really talked in depth about it. I don't have a clear picture on what that looks like. It is county-owned land. We are leasing it. So what that really entails, I think, needs to be nailed down a little bit. According to the lease, I mean, once it's completed, it is a county-owned building. So, right,
Sorry, that's no different than the Saddle Club.
correct. So it would be operated by the Expo board. They would maintain it, create the budgets, take care of any maintenance, that sort of thing. But it is on county property. So.
When you guys do have those conversations, I think it would be important to know that we would have to raise taxes to do that. I mean, if we can't absorb any additional operating expenses.
Our goal is to be a standalone entity.
Yeah.
We can still continue to fundraise. The 4-H can fundraise. We are hoping that, and we see it. I mean, I have a lot of people who reach out through our email and our Facebook who want to rent the building for some things I've never even heard of. But there's opportunities there. And the state fair, for example, when they host a horse show, their rental fees are in the hundreds of thousands. Obviously, we are not going to charge hundreds of thousands of dollars, but those people who have in the past had horse shows at the state fair because that was the largest area for them, they've approached us between the Saddle Club and having the expo there. They could have horse shows, large enough horse shows, and they're going to pay. I mean, they're used to paying $100,000. So that is our goal. We want to be standalone. I don't want to raise taxes. I already pay quite a bit, so I'm not here at all to raise my taxes.
I just wanted to, when you guys have those conversations, I don't know if anyone's ever given it to you straight like that. Like the county, in my opinion, couldn't participate without raising taxes. And so that's why the sustainability plan is really important to us, because we don't want to raise taxes either, like you just said. So that's our sticking point,
Yeah, I'm definitely not here to raise my taxes. Okay.
I appreciate that you've come here, Brianna, to talk about this, but I think we're getting a little too far ahead, because none of us have ever even sat down and really gone through this report. It had been presented to us to ask questions, to answer questions with Dan or the Community Foundation or anybody else. So I think a lot of this right now is just speculation. But I appreciate that you've come here to talk and present
Yeah.
some of the information. I know I've met with J.R. Martin and Mott Switzer, and the next step with him was, to meet with the commissioners. This was long before this report was coming out. But I think, in my mind, I think we need to kind of put a pause and go back, let the Community Foundation, Dan Wright, you guys digest everything within this report, make the appropriate changes that you say, because I agree, I don't know that all of the things that the HVAC and the things that you have purchased, is that included, not included, and get a better picture, and then bring the stakeholders back in to see where we're at.
Number one thing that I've heard from the community is why did it do this before the livestock, the animal barns? I mean, I know the answer to it, but I don't think a lot of people know why. Your original intent, as I understand it, was to build the 4-H animal livestock facilities first, and then this so-called expo center. I don't know if you want to address that or not. Most people, that is the number one question. I've gotten dozens of questions, and I've told them.
Yeah. So it's my understanding, this was before I was on the board, that they were applying for a grant, and it was suggested that if we said we were building this multi-use building first, or this expo hall first, it would look better on the grant application. And at the time, with the information that was given to the expo board, they felt that that was their best choice. I mean, obviously they wanted to be awarded the grant money, so they took the advice that they were given and moved forward with that. We can't change that. We can't go back. We're going to make a plan on how to go forward. But it's not that this building that's currently under construction is of no use, especially to the 4-H. I mean, they would love to have the space. That's for them to do all the things that they want to do that they get limited on because of space or because of location, that type of thing.
I think the general consensus is that if it built the barns first, COVID hadn't happened, chief engineer or chief construction guy didn't come down with COVID, if it had been built on Cardinal Field and cost 1/3, a lot of ifs. Like I said, it was a perfect storm of if it could possibly go wrong. It went wrong. Didn't get the Lilly grant, but you hired a consultant who advised to build this center first to have income coming in while generating income. So then next step would be generate the funds partially from this expo center to build the second phase, which are the barns, because the current barns are inadequate, unsafe, just like I said, an embarrassment to the county. They actually are. I was in 4-H 9 years. Every county I go to, their 4-H facilities are far better than ours, with the exception of the Smith building.
Yeah,
the Ready 1.0, Randolph County, I think it was, built
yeah,
their new 4-H facilities from their Ready monies, so it is possible.
yeah. And I do want to note, too, I mean, I know there's been a lot of ups and downs with the project, but they originally raised somewhere between $1.3 and $1.5 million in private donations. That's not including some of the matches or the in-kind donations that we received. And our list of donors is a little over 300 donors. So if you look at that list, I mean, there are, about every company you can name, individuals, they want this project. Now, they're just as frustrated, I think, as you guys are. I'm admittedly frustrated. I like to have a plan, and I like to know how to move forward. And that's what we're doing. We're working through the process to find that path to move forward. And we're taking steps. Working on the lease agreement is a step forward. That came out of the RMC meeting. Restructuring our board was a big, one of the big topics that came out of the RMC meetings. I say RMC meetings because that's where the meetings were. Sorry. Yeah, we've gained 5 new board members in the last 6 months. But one of the big things was name change, which, like I addressed earlier, we are 100% on board with changing the name. We're just kind of using that as part of our PR to jumpstart fundraising and bringing the project back. So I know there's a lot of frustration, and it's okay to be frustrated with the process, but I don't want it to be thought that this project isn't something that our community wants.
The people who talk to me are 90% in favor of it. The problem is they don't live online.
Yeah, stay off the book face.
You just scroll by and don't pay attention to it.
Yeah, I like reading them, but I don't normally respond.
I would lay money down if I had it, but they're busy writing as we speak, and that's fine. I'm kind of used to it. What else? To the people out there writing online, bring it on. I think there's a movie by that title. Anything else?
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to
Second.
adjourn. Thank you.